And here's the thing, that relationship that you have with a podcast guest, get done like 30 days out, email them. And here's the thing, they're going to answer your emails this time. They're going to answer your calls.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenly, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine, the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make the change. Today, we have an amazing interview ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Basically, we have shows within the show. Sometimes we have interviews with industry leaders, executives who are shaking up the space and are going to teach you something that they do that's helped them be successful. Sometimes we're going to cover trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be very soon, and what that means for them. Every Tuesday, we drop a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that will help drive better results in your day-to-day. Sometimes we'll open it up for Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on. Feel free to send those over to podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, occasionally you'll hear a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that's been bouncing around in his head about the recruitment space and things that you need to know about. So let's get into it. All right. Today, I've got an incredible guest joining us for a conversation. Set the scene. In a world where AI and automation is creating more noise with clients than ever before, how do you set yourself apart? Who better to talk about this than Ben? So Ben, what's up? How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Definitely excited to join you and talk about setting yourself apart.
Love it. So for anyone who doesn't know Ben, host of the Elite Recruiter podcast, we actually just jumped off recording an episode on your side. I think you're nearing or surpassed 100 episodes on that show.
Getting close. It actually started as just like an MVP and a thought, and it's kind of evolved since then. And I'm just having an absolute blast with that. But one of the reasons why I actually want to jump on this podcast is talk about how you can actually use a podcast to set yourself apart. And you can probably just do it in about 2 hours a week.
I love that. And so this is coming from someone who has the experience to say it. Like, you've been at an agency, you've been in-house, and now you have started your own. So you're going to have the perfect perspective for it. So let's get into it. So let's set the scene. You're talking about how do you really set yourself apart with all of that. So tell me about your story a little bit there.
Well, let me just kind of start off went into an agency straight out of college, just like many other recruiters back in the early 2000s. Like, that was your gateway into recruiting. And I loved my time there. Smile and dial, turn and burn. Kind of got burnt out when they, I won a huge account. I opened it. I closed it. Ended up being like millions of dollars of revenue for the organization. And they kind of just like, all right, we're cutting that out and giving that to another sales rep and another recruiter. So I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. So ended up going internal and really focused on the internal side on government contracting. And it's a space that I'm actually passionate about. That's where our firm is kind of focused on. If you think about this, if the engineer that you hired doesn't do a good job building that product, somebody dies overseas. So you have to focus on hiring the best. And that's just the process that we have. But from there, went to a bunch of different, large government contractors before we started our own firm. And our firm is kind of set up as I would say a lifestyle company. We love recruiting. It's an absolute passion of mine, but we also love shutting it down and going to France.
Hey, that's a great balance. Let me know if you're ever hiring for a marketer. Totally kidding. Matt will kill me if I left. But no, that's great. Like, that's how you do it, right? And I'm sure you've learned lessons along the way to get to that point. But that's how you set up a company.
And it's one of the things why I want to talk about how you can start a podcast is honestly, I wasn't the fastest person on the phone. I'm never the smooth talker. There are some friends of mine that are the absolute, best salespeople that you will ever talk to. And they're absolutely amazing. And I love them to death, but that just wasn't me on the phone. That just wasn't me doing things. So I had to find a different way to kind of establish myself. And we're in the relationship business. And here's the funny thing. If you've been on the phone with enough candidates, you ask questions and the candidates love talking about themselves. And it kind of just dawned on me, looking at some of these super successful firms, looking at these super successful recruiters, they're not just smiling and dialing all day. They have other avenues and sales channels. Some of those sales channels is actually a podcast. Some of the best recruiters I know have all written books. They have YouTube accounts and all this stuff. One, I'm not a good writer. Like, thank God for ChatGPT and thank God for Grammarly and Microsoft Word. I can't write worth crap. So that was already out the door for me. So like, but I'm a people person and I know how to ask questions. So the initial like MVP of the podcast was like, I called up some friends and like, hey, I want to talk to you guys. I have an idea. You guys just want to like be down for a interview over Zoom. And they were down. Awesome. Got it published on Spotify, got it published on Apple, had like 5 downloads that month. And I called it a success. So, coming close to 100 episodes in with the Elite Recruiter podcast, one of the things I've also done is a industry specific podcast. And, if you want to really like become an industry expert fast, like a podcast is the way to go. And it's called Decentralized Careers, Web3 space. And if you like, I kind of put a pause on that just because I'm really focused on GovCon, but I wanted to try out a new industry and I wanted to jump in and be an authoritative space when it came down to being in the industry. If you want to know a good laugh, between episode 3 and 5, I already had hiring managers reaching out to me.
That quickly. That's crazy. That's
that
amazing.
Quickly.
Well, yeah. I mean, so there's always been this weird dynamic, right? Of I was talking to Hung Lee the other day and we were talking about like, what are leading indicators to success when you're building a community and other things? And he was like, don't even look at it before a year. It's going to take time and everything else. But he's a much broader space, right? He's thinking about like all recruiters and everything else. But when you do start to niche down, it is fascinating how you bring up. It's like once people know that you're talking to them specifically, you can help them. Like they understand that and there's not many options out there. So the fact that you got 3 to 5 episodes in and they started reaching out to you, there's something to that I'm sure you were just like, was that kind of that aha moment?
It was definitely an aha moment. But here's also the thing with like a lot of podcasts, like when you are the host, try to do 25% of the talking or less. You want to make them the star. You want to make them like talking about their success. You want them to talking about what they're doing, how their company is growing, some of the awesome things that they're doing. And trust me, their marketing team, their PR team, like this is stuff that they're like dying to get. Like one podcast episode, I always joke around, like one podcast episode could easily turn into 30 days of content for yourself or your company or the person that you're hosting. So they're like loving the podcast. They love clips, all this stuff. And like, you've also created this incredible relationship because think about this. In the last like probably month, they've gotten 200-300 emails from recruiting firms asking like, oh yeah, we can help you. We can help you. Even personally on these events, we can help you. But if you send them an email like, hey, love to chat with you, love to host you on this industry podcast, love to highlight your company, your organization, all these things, I can't tell you how often they say yes. I don't really pitch at the end of the podcast. It's really like a relationship. It's like kind of like one of the things I do is like, hey, if there's anything that you ever need, let me know. And one of the things I do with all the podcast guests is I actually give them the raw footage because I know most of these companies have like these internal marketing teams, internal media teams, and you've just given them so much work that I can't tell you how many of them have been dying to get from their leader.
Yes. Can speak to this firsthand. 6 months in, building a content engine is real. It is not easy. You will definitely take all the help and handouts that you can get while you do it. But yeah, to your point, like I think that advice, how you approach podcasting, and the host should speak 25% of the time, that the guest speaks 75. Translate that to sales. Think about how many sales calls you get on, and it's like, can I just tell you what I'm looking for before you give me this whole pitch, this whole demo, and you go completely off the rails on things that I'm not interested in? So I love that, and the relationship at the end is how you say, like, they can tell you're genuine from that conversation. So I love that you really approach it that way. So yeah, I'll stop talking. I've hit my 25% mark so far. So keep going with yours.
One of the things I do actually, like I do like have a recruiting slant on the industry podcast. So towards the end, I have like, what I have based on my Elite Recruiter podcast, I have like a bit of a quick fire questions. And what it is, it's like actionable insights for people that are listening. And for them and their industry, some of the questions that I ask is like, hey, what are some of the like hiring challenges that you guys have had, and what did you help you guys succeed, and how did you find these talent? Okay, and then they go into that. Where are some of the best places that you found the talent for your team? They start talking about that, and I have a few of those questions where they just like they literally share their secrets. Like these CEOs and leaders are hiring managers are sharing their secrets and sharing what type of people that they're looking for their organization. And that's a great sales pitch for them, but it's also great information for yourself too. Because of like what they're looking for is also the same that the other companies are looking for.
It's when you realize it's weird. You have to do these unscalable things that unlock scalable. So so many people think that they're unique. They have their own struggles, they have their own use cases, but the reality is like, yeah, there's small nuances to it. But most of the use cases are pretty similar, or you can bucket them into 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. And then that's where it's like, maybe you're recruiting for a very specific industry, or they're trying to hire this type of role. You can now share that experience, share that story with all of those people that are going through it. And it widens this net, but it's still highly relevant to them.
And one of the craziest things about podcasts, what I've also learned is you post a podcast and like 1 to 2 years later, people are still finding that podcast that you posted, that first one or the second one. Like it's evergreen content.
Mm-hmm. My favorite is, some people, I used to do this. I need to start at episode 1. I want to start at the beginning. And then you talk to the host later on. They're like, skip the first 10. They're garbage. I was working out the kinks. Like, just hop on later. I promise you're not missing anything. But yeah, like you said, I mean, they're still out there. You can still find them. And it's kind of fun to see also where they've either doubled down on niching or just how they've evolved their own thought processes and everything over time.
But one of the things I definitely want to highlight is like, this is something that you could do in 2 hours a week. Like this is like the 2 hours a week, like one of those hours is something you can do in your off time, when you're not on the phone, when you're not smiling and dialing, when you're not sitting there crafting those emails.
So did you have to think about this problem in a different way? Or like, how did you start to wrap your head around to understand, like, how do you need to change your position, your approach to podcasting?
Well, even before the podcasting, I realized like just who I am and like how I approach things isn't as slick or as cool as some of these other people. So I had to figure out what worked for me. And that's kind of where podcasting turned into like an option. But now when it comes to like podcasting, a lot of it's just going to be like trial and error. Go call a friend up or a friend in the industry and like do your first like 1 to 2, like what I call MVP, like minimum viable product. And like, if you've been in the space, you have friends in the industry, and trust me, they would love to be interviewed by you. Hop on Zoom, start off with Zoom. I use Riverside FM, which is an amazing platform. But I think my first like 25 episodes was just Zoom, and you could actually download the video. It gives you like, if you do like a Zoom recording, it also gives you a separate audio file too. And that's what I use for my podcast.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you started to put that into practice. You were talking about, you spoke to your friends, you went through Zoom, you went through all of that. Now, as you're moving a little bit further, and I'm going to go slightly off script here because I'm just purely curious at this point, are you doing more episodes with like clients, with partners, with candidates? Like because you're using this to build relationships and start to understand them and also create content that's helpful for them. So it's like you could do biz dev in a number of different ways here. So what's your, like, how do you balance all of those?
So think about this, like every single person that you talk to in the industry is either a candidate or a hiring manager, or they will be a hiring manager.
I like that.
Because like if you're planning on being in an industry for a decade, those people that you're talking with now are going to be the ones hiring people soon. So it is a perfect way to start building that relationship right now with those people. But yeah, like when it comes to I don't think of it as a client, a candidate or something. I think of it as a chance to highlight their story and help them share their success. That's like the way that I think about it and the way that I look at it when I'm actually interviewing them.
All right. So let's teach us, like, how would you recommend someone start implementing this today? Like list out whether it's steps, process, whatever it is.
The biggest thing is actually just sending that first introduction email. Like pick 10 people. Because not everybody's going to say yes. So pick 10 people, send them an intro email saying, hey, I would love to highlight you. I'm putting together this industry podcast. And you could just like throw out a name. You can work on that later. Pick a time, what works for you to do, like set aside for 30 minutes to, 45 minutes or an hour. Here's kind of like the questions that I want to ask. And you kind of want to talk about that. If you want a good laugh, like throw this into Chat GPT. Like, hey, I would like to interview somebody for this new podcast that I'm going to put the name of the podcast. Write me an introduction email. It's insane. It doesn't.
That I believe.
But yeah, pick 10 people. We'll say 3 of them say yes. Set up some time, set up a Zoom, make them feel at ease when you get them on, like prep them also between the time of like them saying yes to the actual doing of the podcast, kind of have some like pre-put questions that you put in the Outlook calendar. So that way a guest kind of knows what direction that you're going to go with it. I know I've talked to a lot of like people that have been on other podcasts and they were just like I'm on a podcast. And it started, and like, the host just started quick firing questions. One of the biggest things that I've learned is kind of like help guide the conversation, and to guide the conversation ahead of time, kind of give like what kind of questions that you're looking at asking, so that way they could think about the answers.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I love that. Because there's also nothing worse than getting on a podcast and listening to it later on thinking, I had so many better answers, but I was stuck in the moment because I didn't know how to respond. That I wish I could go back and say this instead.
And I think that really dawned on me one time because I was on a podcast and there wasn't enough preparation. So it was like I use quickfire questions as mostly just a way to separate the part of the podcast into another part. But it was like quickfire questions, and I got done. And I was just like, man, I have so many better answers. I just didn't think about that. And I'm not the quickest person when it comes to like on my feet. I have to process a little bit.
Okay, I'm gonna quickfire you now. Tools to get started. So you mentioned like Zoom, Riverside FM. What are some tools, tech, anything that's helpful for people as they get started with these?
So if you want a good laugh, one of the biggest barriers for me even getting started for setting up a podcast, and even after I like recorded my first like episode, was how do I edit it? I tried, I think like 4 or 5 editing tools, and they were just so complex that I was just like, this is the dumbest idea I could ever think of. So I used Fiverr for a little while, or Fiverr, but I ran across this tool called Descript. And I'll have Sam put it in there. What it does is it transcribes a podcast, and you edit it like a Word document. It is the craziest thing. So like I know how to edit a Word document, and because of that, I can actually edit my podcast.
That's wild.
Another tool that I absolutely love is when it comes to show notes. Show notes, like once again, writing is not one of my greatest skill sets. So trying to write good show notes was just backbreaking. You know what? AI tools. There's a company called Decipher and a company called Cast Magic that you actually just drop your podcast in there. Decipher does it gives you SEO show notes. It can help you write an article based off your show. Like it gives you like highlights, transcriptions, all that stuff. Even it can cut videos from it. Cast Magic is also amazing too. It's freaking awesome too. So you drop it in there, your podcast in there. AI analyzes it. It has like a magic chat side where it gives you like 10 potential titles. It gives you an introduction that the AI pulls out of the podcast. It gives you like a bio. It gives you a breakdown of the summary. It gives you highlights for like reels. It gives you scripts for reels, Twitter, like stories and conversations, newsletter. But here's the coolest thing about Cast Magic. And if you've played with ChatGPT, like this is my favorite part. It has like an additional side where you can actually just like throw some prompts in there. Like, hey, can you write me like a SEO 3,000 character show notes? And it'll just like, it works just like ChatGPT, but based on all the data from your podcast. So you can ask it questions and it gives you answers. So I would say those are the biggest ones. There's also some really good like video programs out there. They're not perfect, but my God, like I can't even imagine where they're going to be a year from now. Those are video AI, like VIDYO AI. Opus Pro is a really another phenomenal one. They all do a great job getting the cuts. Like you need to do a little bit of editing, but it's way better than what I was doing a few months ago and just like spending 8 hours trying to make like 5 video clips on like all these different products and software and then just get like 2 views. But yeah, let the let the AI help you.
Yeah, I love that. And that's honestly my biggest takeaway is you're sharing all this is it's like using AI to get yourself out of your own way. The hardest parts is like the 0 to 1, right? Like, okay, I don't like to write. Okay, well, let's use tools to do that where it gets rid of that brainstorm stage and it's like, okay, it gives you the jumping off point. Here's 10 titles. Cool, now I've got ideas. I can play with this word. I want to tweak that. Ooh, I like that over there. Don't like that. You can mix and match where it just becomes much easier and more manageable to go about. So yeah, I love all that. Honestly, I think someone could just listen to this part of the show and be like, okay, cool, I'm done. I'm checking out here. Like it's a wrap. Love it. So you've got a podcast up, you've got all the tools going. What are some of the leading indicators? Like what should we be looking for to understand if it's working? Not just in terms of like if the podcast itself is working, but also thinking about you did this to build relationships, to help your business grow. What are you looking at with those?
So when it comes to like podcasting, think of this as the long game. Like you're not doing this to get a quick sale tomorrow. Like go do a cold email, go do a cold email, go do a cold call. What you're trying to do is you're trying to build a farm. Like I kind of joked around with some friends. I'm like, the Elite Recruiter podcast. I actually told a friend, I was like, hey, if I'm 100 episodes in and I'm the only one listening, and if I got something out of it every single episode, I still call that a success. And like it, I think it was a quote from Gary Vee, like just go do it and don't look at the numbers, don't look at the views. Go out there and focus on creating quality content and doing quality work, and success will come to you. And here's the thing. That relationship that you have with a podcast guest, get done like 30 days out, email them. And here's the thing, they're going to answer your emails this time. They're going to answer your calls. Like if you have a great candidate that you want to NPC and you just think they'd be perfect for that company, hey, I got a great candidate, that I'm working with. I wanted to send it over to you guys before I send it to anybody else. Are you looking for this kind of person right now?
It goes a long way. That's impactful. So, okay, don't count the downloads. You're saying earlier, it only took you 3 to 5 episodes to really start hearing from hiring managers and everything. What are the common reasons then that people might not do this? Like, what are the objections that they're coming up against, and how would you help them overcome those?
Like one of my objections is like, I'm not a smooth talker. Like, what am I going to say? How am I going to do this? I don't like being in front of the camera. There's so many things that you could say to no matter what you're doing. But at the same time, like you also need to realize you have to do something different if you want to stay ahead of the game. And these big firms, like big, large staffing companies, they're paying for digital marketing. They're paying for ads. They're paying for huge funnels. They're paying for all these tools that as a small firm, we probably don't have access to. We don't have access to that kind of firepower. They're writing books. Like it is the funnels for the large organizations and the very successful recruiters. They're not just email. They're not just phone, and they're not just InMail on LinkedIn. They're doing so many different things that help build the funnel for the long term for their organization. So like, you can use AI and you can use technology to, I don't want to say mirror what they're doing, but you can also be like, AI can make you 100 times more effective and productive than some of those big firms with like 10 to 15 people.
I love that. And you don't want to see how many times I was just like taking notes and underlining it. There's this key point. So yeah, I mean, having to stay different to stay ahead of the game. And my favorite is the David versus Goliath story. So yeah, you've got these big firms that, yeah, they can spend millions on advertising, on whatever they want, but they're usually slow, and they're not always, because they're so big and slow, they aren't always following best practices or able to do different. And that's where you as a small organization, you can be nimble, you can do something different and really push the boundaries, stand out different, be a little bit of an innovator or an instigator in the space. So really love that you pulled that out there. So that's one of my biggest takeaways. Like if you had to almost distill down your takeaway for this, for the audience, like how would you put that in a few sentences?
I would honestly, like you can use a podcast to really set yourself apart, develop the relationships, and it's a long game for business. Here's the thing. I have podcasts like from 2-3 years ago that are still getting listens, and people are still reaching out to me from that. Like this is evergreen content that can really set yourself apart. And one podcast, think about this. One podcast can be audio, it can be a video, and it could be like 10 to 20 video clips across social media. It could be like 10 to 20 different, like when it comes to like highlights and like quotes. Like one podcast can literally create 30 days of content every single year for you. And you could repurpose that content year in, year out.
I love that. Yeah. The content multiplication is what I like to call it. And you hit on that next point. That's so impactful. People think it's one and done. Once I spit out that podcast episode, once I write that post, once I share that video, it's done. It's used. It's like, no, it's like a book. You can use it over and over, read it again. Like a lot of people forget too. So it's helpful to, especially if it's value driven or it's educational, keep showcasing that. Like it's always going to be helpful.
And trust me, these leaders love being like re-showcase like later on. Like if it's something that you shared like 6 months ago and you're resharing it again, trust me, they get excited. And like they'll even hit you up like, hey, thank you again for sharing that.
Love it. I love it. So this was great. I learned so much in this conversation, and especially as someone starting up her own podcast over here. So selfishly, this is a big learning opportunity for me. So just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us on the show. Truly appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today. Hope it inspires some recruiters to start their own shows, incorporating this into their day-to-day and everything. So yeah, I hope everyone got as much out of this as I did. And that's it. That was the show with Ben. So until next time.